A few days ago, I made a video about how ICE has finally made it out to our corner of Kansas, a very red district, where I happen to be running for Congress. And understandably, there were some people in the comments on those videos wondering why it matters. Isn't ICE great? Shouldn't they in fact be shooting more people in the street? And most of that is just social media screaming. People who want to stir something up because that's their version of a hobby. But it also underlines that it's kind of actually useful and important for politicians to step up and explain what's happening and why it matters, because some people pretend not to get it for the sake of social media drama. Some people legitimately just don't understand, and that's why we should have conversations about that sort of thing. And there's a lot of material out there about this, a lot of videos, a lot of writing, a lot of articles. I thought I would try something a little bit different. Never done this before. We'll see how this works, but I got somebody to help me out. This is Mr. Technopants. Mr. Technopants is an original character created by my boy Oliver. We call him Ox, and I've borrowed him, and he's helped me put together a little diorama to help me explain sort of what happens when ICE encounters Americans on the street and immigrants on the street, and we can talk about why that matters. Here's Mr. Technopants again. Now, I don't mean to make light of the stuff I'm about to talk about because it's important, and I'm going to have to oversimplify everything, of course. But I thought this would help explain how ICE is overstepping the lines the founders and the courts drew around government. Let's say Technopants is on the street, and he encounters an ICE agent. This is the sort of encounter the founders thought about a lot, how the American government and its people would interact. They limited that government specifically to protect Americans in encounters exactly like this. One of the ways they limited it was splitting the government into the executive branch, that's the ICE or a DHS official like this, and the judicial branch, that's Grimlock here. I ran out of Lego guys, and Grimlock is cool. That's why he's Grimlock. The legislative branch is there too, but I'm not going to bother putting someone out of the table to be Congress because Congress doesn't do anything anymore. That's why I'm running, This agent happens to be armed like he's in a war zone. Maybe he's got plate carriers on, definitely armed, definitely wearing a mask. Local cops, FBI agents, DEA agents, all sorts of law enforcement are in greater danger on a regular basis than ICE agents. But this is a new kind of thing. It's less about law and more about enforcement. But he is still a government agent, so the Constitution and the laws still limit him. Let's say our agent wants to take Mr. Technopants in. If Technopants is on the street, the agent can stop him and question him if he has a reasonable suspicion that Technopants is a removable alien or that he's committing a crime. The agent has to have probable cause to arrest him, though. Those are specific legal terms. The agent doesn't get to just decide that his suspicion is reasonable. Thinking that someone committed a traffic violation, for example, does not count because the feds don't enforce those. That's why we expect federal agents to be professionals. It's an important job that takes good judgment and self-restraint. And I don't think really anybody, speaking honestly at least, would say today that ICE is exercising good judgment and self-restraint. What's actually happening is that people, including American citizens, are being detained because the agent feels like it and knows there won't be any consequences. Maybe the person was speaking Spanish or hanging around in a parking lot. Maybe they even had a valid ID, or if they were an immigrant, maybe they had valid papers. ICE just doesn't accept them. They're often arresting people without cause, removing them to a second location to have their biometrics scanned. Americans have spent days in custody after arrests like that. Can you imagine what the founders or even Ronald Reagan would have said about masked government agents arresting people because they were speaking the wrong language, including Americans? Much less arresting them or shooting them because they were sassing the agent. And it gets even worse. The founders were particularly concerned about people encountering the government on the street, but they were much, much, much more concerned about government entering into people's homes. They'd lived under tyranny, and they wanted to make sure that our government was limited to make America something fundamentally different than that. So the Fourth Amendment very specifically protects our homes. The law says that outside of rare exceptions, like somebody screaming for help from the inside, agents need a warrant signed by a neutral judge to enter a home. That would be Grimlock here, remember? One branch of government checking and balancing the other branches. That's literally what it's there for. But that's not what ICE is doing. Grimlock is a federal judge. He's busy. It might take a few hours or a day to get that warrant, and ICE has a massive quota and a bigger budget than the Marine Corps, and they are not used to oversight, and they do not like it. So back in 2025, ICE wrote a secret memo, one that we just learned about a month ago. The memo ICE wrote says that ICE doesn't need to wait for a neutral judge, just what's called an administrative warrant, which is a warrant created by the executive branch, even by ICE itself. In other words, ICE says that ICE only needs permission from ICE to enter a home, even the home of an American. That memo was secret because ICE took steps to keep people from finding out about it. That means that ICE says that ICE can enter your home if ICE says so, and only ICE gets to know that. No need for judges, no need for oversight, just trust the government. Yes, Americans have had their homes broken into by ICE agents, giving themselves permission. Yes, Americans have been arrested. Yes, Americans have been killed. And yes, Americans' rights are in danger, even if those things were only happening to immigrants. Our rights don't exist if we don't protect them. If we draw lines and say the Constitution only applies to the right sort of folks, if we collapse the checks and balances that put the power to make arrests and the power to enter homes and the power to pull triggers and the power to decide if that's okay into one set of hands, so we don't do that on paper. But constitutional rights don't exist if they aren't defended. That should be the least we demand of our government, that it defends our rights and respects the limits on it. We don't expect it, we demand it. But our current Congress doesn't care because it's getting paid and reelected and life is easy. So some of us are running for office to do better. I'm Colin McRoberts. I'm a Democrat. I'm running for Congress in the Kansas 1st District. Thanks for listening.